All right, good evening to those who've joined so far. It's just before 7, so we're going to wait a couple minutes and see if others join before we get started at 7. So hang tight and yeah, we'll get started soon. Thank you to everyone who has joined so far. I just want to let you know that we'll get started in a minute or two, right around 7 o'clock. Hey, it's 7 o'clock, so why don't we get started? Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the virtual public meeting for the City of Peterborough's Stormwater Rate Study. Thank you so much for taking the time to participate this evening. Today is an opportunity to introduce you to the study and answer your questions. My name is Alicia Evans. I am a facilitator with ACOM, and I will be your moderator for this evening. But to start off the meeting, I'm going to pass it over to Curtis to do a land acknowledgement and some introductions.
Hello, everyone. So first, I'd like to acknowledge that we gather on the traditional and treaty territories of the Williams Treaties First Nations, including the Anishinaabe peoples of Hiawatha, Curve Lake, Alderville, Beausoleil, Georgina Island, Rama, and the Mississaugas of Scugog Island. For generations, the Mississauga Anishinaabe have cared for these lands and waters, guided by knowledge, ceremony, and responsibility. We recognize the ongoing impacts of these treaties, the injustices that occurred, and the enduring strength and resurgence of Indigenous communities. As we live and work here, we commit to reflection, respect, and meaningful action in the spirit of reconciliation. And I guess I'll just dive into some introductions here. So today we have Ian Boland. He's the Director of Asset Management and Capital Planning for the City of Peterborough. We have myself. I'm the Manager of Water Resource Systems for the City of Peterborough. My name's Curtis May. We have Sarah Deeth with us, Communications Specialist for the City of Peterborough. And then from our consultant ACOM, we have Pippi Warburton. She's the Project Manager from the consulting side.
Okay, thank you, Curtis. I just want to run through a few housekeeping items before we review the agenda. So today we are using Zoom's webinar platform. In this platform, all attendees are muted and you won't have any access to your video. So that means that we will invite your participation through the Q&A feature. And you can access this feature through the menu bar by hovering your mouse over the screen. And if you're using a smartphone or tablet, just tap on the screen and you should see it. No other attendees will be able to see the questions, and there's also an option to submit your questions anonymously to the project team. So we know that problems with technology can and do happen, so we appreciate your patience with us if anything happens on our end. And if you are having issues yourselves, please feel free to use the Q&A feature to ask for help. Dylan will be monitoring this throughout the meeting and will do his best to give you a hand. And finally, this webinar is being recorded so that we can post it to the Connect Peterborough page. So all Q&A will remain anonymous to avoid any privacy concerns. As I mentioned, the purpose of the meeting today is to introduce you to the stormwater rate study and answer your questions. So following this introduction, the project team will provide an overview presentation that introduces stormwater and the importance of stormwater management. The team will talk about how Peterborough residents currently pay for stormwater management, why the city is considering changes to the current stormwater management fee, and how the stormwater rate study will identify a recommendation for this. The team will outline the different funding options that are under consideration and how those options could potentially affect residential and non-residential property owners. The team will also provide information about different incentive program options for property owners that implement good stormwater management practices. And finally, the team will share how Peterborough residents and property owners can participate in this study. So following this presentation, the team will address any questions that you might have. Please feel free to ask your questions throughout the meeting, but we will hold off on responding to them until after the presentation. Okay, I will now pass it over to Pippi.
Thanks, Alicia. Okay, we're going to start by talking about what is stormwater. Next slide. So it's probably pretty obvious to everybody that stormwater comes from rain and melted snow, and it falls on and flows over the land and into the storm drains and creeks and into the sewers and the lakes, and water is captured by vegetation often and absorbed into the natural spaces through a process called infiltration. And it also can evaporate from our natural areas through evapotranspiration. Next slide. So sometimes with these studies, I like to point out when we talk about stormwater infrastructure, what it's not. So we're not talking about the drinking water infrastructure, and we're not talking about the wastewater infrastructure. We're talking about the stormwater infrastructure. The stormwater infrastructure is there to accept the stormwater runoff. And that runoff comes from the hard surfaces, places like roofs and parking lots, that prevent the water from being naturally absorbed into the vegetated areas. So instead, the water flows into the city's stormwater infrastructure, and that can be ditches, stormwater management ponds, catch basins, sewers, and the like. So I think everyone's probably pretty familiar with what happens if stormwater is not managed correctly. So Peterborough certainly had a doozy of a flood back in 2004, and I'm sure if you were there, you certainly remember it. So if stormwater is not managed properly, you tend to see it in the headlines, but it can also cause things like erosion. It can undermine infrastructure and expose infrastructure. It can cause damage to homes and properties through flooding. And polluted stormwater also lowers the quality, which can negatively impact fish habitat and for other aquatic species. And it limits the water-based recreation activities that can happen and also increases the strain on the wastewater treatment facilities. So I'm going to hand it over to Curtis quickly to just talk about the infrastructure you have in the city of Peterborough.
Yeah, so here in the city of Peterborough, we have roughly 317 kilometers of storm sewers, 230 storm sewer outfalls, 34 stormwater management ponds, of which 18 are wet ponds, meaning they hold water continuously. 30, I think there's actually even more than 30 oil and grit separators that the city owns now, 13 kilometers of ditches, 407 culverts, and 163 kilometers of water courses. And it's valued at approximately $1.7 billion. So the infrastructure, once you put it in, it's not just you put it in, set it and forget it. It requires ongoing maintenance. So things like our street sweeping programs, catch basin maintenance, cleanouts, ditch and culverts inspections, outfall inspections and repairs. And one of the bigger projects in terms of operations and maintenance is actually a legislative requirement is when we put in these stormwater management facilities, we have to conduct these large dredging operations. So all that runoff that brings sediment to the stormwater management facility eventually settles out. And we have to do these big dredging operations to remove that sediment and keep the pond functioning appropriately, as well as our cleaning and flushing program. So we have it on a 5-year cycle. So every 5 years, we clean and flush all the storm sewer pipes throughout the city. So there's a lot of maintenance and operational items that go along with just after the fact of putting in all this infrastructure. And with that, I think we can go to the next slide.
Next slide is for Ian.
Perfect. Thank you. Evening, everyone. So Curtis talked a little bit about, some of the ongoing maintenance that we do with a lot of the infrastructure that's in the ground, but a big component of our water resources program, our stormwater program, is our flood reduction capital program, which was really initiated after the 2004 flood that Pippi mentioned earlier. This is a major capital program that, it resulted in a long list of, over 100 capital projects at the time that were intended to reduce flood risk for the community, for the homes, the businesses within the city. Some of those key projects that I'm sure many of you are aware of include the Bethune Street project, or the Central Area Flood Reduction Project. That one had a value of around $53 million. Which diverts high flows from Jackson Creek around the downtown. Another big one was the culvert upgrades on Curtis Creek, which included major upgrades at Tivy, Armour, Caddy, and Euclid Avenue. An upcoming project that we have is related to Charlotte Street, which includes a major 100-year sewer going in on Charlotte Street. And then I think, Curtis already mentioned the regular flushing of the storm and sanitary sewers that we have in the city, also another major component of our flood reduction program. So next slide.
Thanks, Ian. Okay, next we're going to talk a little bit about the funding study itself and some of the options that we're looking at. So currently, the city of Peterborough has a funding method in place. The stormwater management infrastructure is partly funded through a stormwater management fee. And this fee was implemented as an interim solution that the city, as the city explores other funding solutions. The interim fee calculation is as follows. So the current fee is $32.76 per year for every $100,000 of assessed value of property. So similar to your taxes, it's associated with the assessed value of the property. So as a simple example, if your property is valued at $300,000, your fee would simply be 3 times that $32.76. So just under $100 per year. Again, another example, if your property is worth $450,000, your fee would be 4.5 times that fee. So about $150 per year annually. Next slide. So it's important to remember that residents and business owners have always been paying for stormwater management. Just the way you've been paying for it has changed. So before the implementation of the interim stormwater management fee, funding from stormwater came almost entirely from the wastewater surcharge and from property taxes. The city is required to show that it can pay for critical infrastructure sustainably, and that's regulated through an Ontario regulation that also requires cities to have asset management plans in place and show that they can manage their assets responsibly on your behalf. Next slide. So the current rate study that we're undertaking on behalf of the city here, the team is going to review how to improve stormwater funding. 3 funding options will be evaluated, and the team will share the public they'll share with the public and collect feedback. And the preferred option will be presented to the public. So why is this happening? The city wants to do this to better align property fees with the stormwater impact and to facilitate long-term financial sustainability, improve the fee fairness, and encourage property owners to implement on-site stormwater management practices. Next slide. The interim fee charges residents based on how much the property is worth, not based on the amount of runoff coming from their property or the impact that property has on the stormwater system. The new stormwater fee could charge property owners a fee that matches their estimated impact to the stormwater system. And how would we do that? We'll talk about that too. So our next slide, oh, go back one. Nope. We're missing something there.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know what's happening with that.
Okay, let's go back to the pie chart.
there
I
it
can
is.
still talk
Okay.
to it. It's coming in slowly. That's okay. So this slide is showing the contributions from the stormwater to the stormwater funding in the city of Peterborough. So on the left, we see stormwater funding collection. So the amount of money that we're collecting to pay for stormwater infrastructure in the city of Peterborough, 25% of it is coming from non-residential properties, so commercial, industrial spaces, and only 25% of that is 25% of that is coming from non-residential properties like commercial, industrial, whereas that 75% of that funding amount is coming from residential properties. So the residential properties are paying the lion's share for stormwater infrastructure. If we look at the other side, where we've calculated runoff area for the same properties, we see that it's more of a 50-50 split, where 52% of the residential properties, 52% of the total runoff is coming from residential properties, and 48% is coming from the non-residential properties. Now, how we calculate runoff area is an approximation. We use the total area of the property and we multiply it by a runoff coefficient that sort of gives us an indicator of the property type. So, for example, it would be 0.9 for a paved area and maybe 0.1 for a park. So that gives us an evaluation of the amount of runoff coming from the property based on its size. Next slide. Forward and look at the options that we're considering. We have some guiding principles and evaluation criteria that we're taking into account. The first one is fairness and equity. So the fee reflects the property's impact on the stormwater system. Transparency and defensibility. The fee clearly shows why and how much a property contributes to the stormwater funding. And it has some administrative efficiency. The fee structure is easy to implement and to maintain. It provides the city with some financial sustainability and supports the long-term infrastructure needs, and also works towards environmental protection by encouraging practices that reduce negative impacts on stormwater and the environment. Next slide. So how much money do we need? The funding requirements currently, the stormwater management is currently funded through multiple sources, as we were discussing. And the new fee could consolidate all those funding requirements into and bring them under this one new fee structure. So right now, the interim stormwater fee brings in about $4.3 million annually. The wastewater surcharge, about $1 million. The flood reduction capital levy is bringing in about $1.9 million annually. And the general tax levy contributes another $3.2 million. So all of that is just a little over $10 million annually for the that's the consolidated amount that we need, the funding requirements that we need to fund through this new stormwater fee. Next slide. Okay, we're going to move on to stormwater options next and explain the 3 options we're considering for residential properties. So we'll start with option 1, next slide. Excuse me. Okay, option 1 is called the same fee for every residence. Every residence would pay the same fee, and it would be based on the average amount of hard services of all the residential properties in Peterborough. So the pros for this would be it's very simple and low cost to manage. The cons doesn't reflect the actual stormwater runoff from each property. For example, condo owners would pay the same as large residential or single detached homes. This can create issues for affordability and for equity. Okay, next slide. Option 2 is called the residential fee by housing type. And this means that each residential property type has a different rate. Larger residential property types would pay more than smaller residential property types, for example. So this is more accurate and reflects the stormwater runoff from the property better. But it does require a little more effort to administer, and it still doesn't account for the different sizes within each housing type. So large houses would still pay the same as smaller houses. Next slide. Option 3 is a residential fee by housing size and type. So this is where each residential property type still has a different rate. So large single-family homes would pay more than small single-family homes. So really it's more tiers, and each of the properties in that tier, each property type would pay the same amount. So this is the most accurate of the 3 options and would match the fee to the actual runoff best. But it is more complicated and the most costly to manage of all these options. Next slide. For non-residential properties, there's a big discrepancy between each. So it's really worth measuring each one specifically. So for non-residential properties, we're proposing fees that will be based on actual impervious area measured using aerial photography. So we've got a few examples here. On the left, you've got a large commercial property. It's 18,500 square meters in total area. There is some small green space buffer you can see around the outside. And that green space is about 4,500 square meters. So the property would be charged on the impervious area, that 14,000 square meters. Smaller property you can see is much smaller, even though the pictures are the same size. But you can imagine if we have a rate that's based on impervious area, the one on the left is 18,000 square meters. This one is only 1.2 thousand square meters. It's got 200 square meters of green space. You can see that little green patch where the tree is in the top corner. And this property would be charged on the 1,000 square meters of impervious area here. So it picks up the red and the red roofs and the paved areas are shown in yellow there. Next slide. Okay, we're going to just quickly talk about incentive programs next. And for me, incentive programs are some of the most important parts of having a stormwater fee, because you really get some great environmental incentives and helps the city to manage their stormwater quality as well. So the study team is actively considering different stormwater incentive programs. Credits and or subsidies could be provided to property owners if you reduce the amount of runoff coming from the property. So you think about a pond or a tank or anything that holds the water back and delays it from coming at the same time as the peak of a storm. You could also get subsidies or credits for any kind of water quality improvement. So again, ponds provides the sediment falls out, or you could have oil grit separators. There's lots of different types of infrastructure that can improve water quality runoff from a property. Next slide. So the difference between subsidies and credits, the subsidy is a one-time reward for for implementing stormwater measures like rain barrels that you can install around your home. Rain barrels, rain gardens, those kind of things are a good example. And this type of incentive is a lower cost to operate. Credits, on the other hand, are an ongoing reduction to your stormwater fee for installing and maintaining intensive measures like private stormwater detention ponds, oil grit separators, tanks, that type of thing. These incentives must be regularly renewed, and that helps the city ensure that they're being maintained properly and they continue to work as they were designed. Sorry. Credits and rebates for residential properties. So many municipalities limit stormwater credits for non-residential properties and mixed use or large residential properties like condos. And the reason for this is that non-residential properties tend to generate more stormwater runoff than residential properties. So it's almost more important to make sure those large properties that are generally mostly paved, that they have the stormwater infrastructure in place there. Also, offering credits to all properties would cost a lot more to administer. These programs are administratively heavy for municipalities to run. And they're more costly since there's more homes than businesses in Peterborough. So it's more cost effective to run them for just the larger properties. It's almost a cost benefit sort of thing. And fees for residential properties also tend to be quite low anyway. So a residential stormwater credit would only save a few dollars a month. Whereas residential subsidies still offer homeowners hundreds of dollars for upfront installation of basic stormwater management infrastructure. So I'm going to pass it back to Curtis briefly, and he's going to tell you about the Peterborough Rain Garden Subsidy.
Yeah, so just speaking in line with subsidies, so we currently already offer a rain garden subsidy. So the way that this subsidy works is that you basically submit, there's a few vetting questions just to make sure that your property is a good candidate for a rain garden. And then provided that you meet some criteria and that you can install a rain garden on your property, the city will subsidize that rain garden for the materials used up to $1,000. The subsidy is set up so that it's not like it's up to $1,000, but most people actually get the $1,000. It's not out of reach. I think a lot of subsidy programs kind of wave a number in front of people's faces and then you can't actually get that, but ours actually is set up so that you can fairly easily qualify for the $1,000, just based on the amount of roof area you're capturing and the size of the garden. So we've been running that since about 2020. And it's been pretty successful. It's a good way to introduce stormwater management on law level controls. But yes, at this time, it's just a subsidy. It's just a one-time $1,000 subsidy. And if you want more information, you can scan the QR code on the PowerPoint there, and that'll bring you right to the website. And if you're interested, definitely look at applying.
Hey, thank you. Thank you, everyone. So at this point, I just want to talk a little bit about next steps and how to participate in the study at this point in time. So the project team is seeking your initial feedback on the three options that Pippi talked about and the incentive program options. So following this meeting, we invite you to visit connectptbo.ca/stormwater funding review to complete the survey. And there's another slide with this email address as well as a QR code that you can use as well. We'll send out this information following the meeting. So don't worry if you can't get the URL here. But we do want you to fill out the survey, and that will be open until February 13th. So I think that's late next week. Now, following this round of engagement, the study team will evaluate the funding options against the principles and consider the input from the public, as well as discussions with large non-residential property owners. In the spring, there will be another round of engagement with an in-person public meeting, and the project team will share more details around the preferred funding option and how that could impact property owners, gather additional feedback at that point, and then eventually take their recommendations to council, and that should happen in the summer. And then if the new stormwater management fee is approved, it's anticipated that the implementation would begin in 2027. All right, so that's it for the presentation today. Let's go to the question and answer period. As a reminder, please just use the Q&A feature to ask any questions that you might have. And if we happen to run out of time or your question wasn't addressed tonight, you can send it through to the project team through the study's email address, which is rethinktherain@peterborough.ca, or through the study page, which is connectptbo.ca/stormwater-funding-review. You can also use the QR code that's here to access that page. All right, so yeah, I'll open it up. We're getting some questions in, which is great. And we have the first question here. The slide with the 4 funding sources, are all the sources the residential taxpayer under 4 different program names? So I'm just going to go back to here. These sources, are these currently 4 different programs? How are these currently paid for? Can you talk a little bit more about the wastewater surcharge, the flood reduction capital levy, and the general tax levy?
Do you want me to take that one?
Yeah, sure.
Ian, you can take it.
Sorry, yeah. So what you have here are the 4.3 million. That is the stormwater fee that you'll see now on your utility bill. That is the fee that we implemented, a number of years ago. That was increasing annually, around $620,000 to reach a certain goal that we had determined a while ago was needed to meet our stormwater needs. The other fees are related to their sort of funding that comes to the stormwater program from other sources. So the wastewater surcharge, that's your sewer surcharges. Most of that funding is for our flushing program, flushing, cleaning, and CCTV program. The flood reduction capital levy, so that's really comes out of the general tax levy, and that's a specific reserve that's set up by council a while back to fund flood reduction programs. And then the general tax levy portion, that is your capital funding that would be part of an existing capital project, like a new reconstruction of a road. And then there's a stormwater component of that. We just estimated approximately what would come towards stormwater from the general tax levy for the capital program. So hopefully that makes sense.
Like, just add that we have looked at a lot of these across the country. We've done stormwater financing programs for many municipalities, and we benchmark the amount that municipalities spend on their stormwater infrastructure. And so this is really in line with sort of typical benchmarked amounts for municipalities of the same size that have the same size system, how much they spend to maintain and operate their system. So it seems like a lot of money, but when you realize how much infrastructure they have to maintain and to responsible for, you can understand why.
And Ian, can you just clarify, is it currently all properties that are paying into this?
No, so not all of them. So on the wastewater side, most all properties, I would say, would be paying if you pay a sewer surcharge on your water bill. But any property that would be tax exempt in the city generally would not be paying the other 3 right now, because they're based on assessed value. So
thank you. I think there's some concern about perhaps property owner behaviors and pools. So maybe you can speak to whether property owners are allowed to drain their swimming pools into the storm sewers.
I can probably speak to that.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
yeah, it's not advisable to drain swimming pools to the stormwater infrastructure because you have a lot of chlorine and chemicals and things like that. So I think best practice in terms of draining a pool is to get it into the sanitary system in some way, whether you have like a window to your basement and you can put it into a drain in your basement or a toilet or something like that. Um, that then that water will go to the actual wastewater treatment plant instead of to natural water courses. So as far as pool draining goes, that's the best management practice as far as I've been told.
Okay, thank you, Curtis. Okay, so stormwater services were historically funded through property taxes, even when increases were far lower than today. Yet the city now proposes a new fee equal to up to an 8% hike. With taxes already up roughly 21% in 3 years, this shift effectively makes residents pay twice for the same service and moves a core responsibility off the tax levy. What has fundamentally changed to justify this added burden on property owners?
Yep. So did you want me to? I can take that on. So when you're talking about tax increases, so that doesn't just have to do with stormwater. That's tax increases across the board in the city, and those are council directives that get rolled out. When it talks to stormwater management specifically, what we're doing is we're taking the stormwater management component and taking it off the taxes. So maybe, yeah, like maybe your taxes aren't going to decrease because the need for other services has increased based on other services the city provides, but the stormwater is now separate from it. So it's not going to be like, oh, we take it off here and all of a sudden this number is going to go down. It's just it is going to be less proportionate to if we kept them combined, if that makes sense.
Okay.
I think just if I'll add to what Curtis said, just simply put, this is like this fee, what we're proposing here is not creating new funding for this program. This is just a transfer of funding that's already collected through multiple sources, including taxes, and a different way to collect the same money. So it's not collecting any money twice. It's not new or more money towards the stormwater program. It's just another way, a more fair, transparent way to collect it.
Okay, thank you. On that, related to that, could you maybe speak to how the stormwater fee may be affected under a revised fee? So are they anticipated, is it anticipated to go up or down? How do you think it could be impacted at this point under a new fee model?
So I can answer that. I think it depends on the property. So we're going to see a shift as we saw in those pie charts that currently the residential properties are paying almost 75% of the contribution towards the stormwater infrastructure, whereas they're really only contributing 50% of the runoff. So we should see a shift where perhaps some residential properties will pay less than they were before, and more commercial industrial properties might see an increase. So the total amount that they're collecting doesn't change, but it's a shift of who's paying for it. And then once we get the credit program, in place, again, that's going to change, and commercial industrial properties might see their fee reduced again, provided they can show that they have those stormwater management practices on site.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we don't currently have any other questions. So I do want to make sure that we're giving everyone an opportunity to ask them. So please do, if you have a question, type it in now, and then we'll make sure to get to that. All right. So when are you looking to implement these changes? What other means are you looking at I'm thinking communicating this to residents, perhaps counselors, meetings. Pippi, do you want to talk about or Curtis about implementation?
Yeah, so I think, like we said, we're going to be doing public engagement, surveys closing on the 13th. We're going to have various stakeholder sessions throughout the month of February. I believe the recommendation, when did we say the recommendation was going to go forward? I forget, or the preferred method.
I think we said the summer.
Yeah, summer, and then rollout would be for 2027.
Okay, thank you. Okay, while we're waiting to see if other questions come in, I'm wondering if maybe you can talk a little bit about how this could affect people who don't have a direct connection to the stormwater, and I know in some cases people might question why they would have to pay a stormwater fee if they live in a more rural area. So maybe you can speak to rural residents or rural property owners and stormwater.
Yeah, this question comes up quite a bit in these types of studies. And we've done quite a lot of calculations on the length of ditches and the maintenance that's required in ditches. So, keep in mind that all properties drain somewhere. So if you're living in those rural areas and drain to ditches, those ditches have to outlet to somewhere. They have to be maintained. There's culverts along the way that need to be monitored and replaced and whatnot. So there still is infrastructure even in the rural areas. Keep in mind that we're looking at options that, calculate and take into account the amount of impervious area. So if you have a house on a large rural area surrounded by a lot of impervious area, we are trying to take that into account by looking at property types and average impervious areas for those kinds of property types. And then the last point I would mention is that everybody in the city benefits from stormwater management, whether it's driving roads to get your kids to school or to go hither and thither. So everybody benefits from stormwater that's well managed and has a good environment that isn't polluted and erosion that's not happening on our public infrastructure and that sort of thing. So, part of your fee is always to go for to maintain the public infrastructure that we all benefit from. So there's that as well. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. So we don't have any questions at the moment. Please do get them in if you have them. Otherwise, of course, if you don't have any questions now and want to ask after the meeting, once again, you can do that at rethinktherain@peterborough.ca or through the Connect Peterborough site, the Stormwater Funding Review site. I will just give it another moment or two to see if questions come in. And while we're waiting, maybe Pippi, you can talk a little bit more about impervious area and how that plays out in a rate, like a flat rate, where you're not measuring it. How does impervious relate to the flat rates?
Yeah, so we're looking at the averages across different property types. So we do that runoff calculation. So we look at the area and we multiply it by the runoff coefficient. And the runoff coefficient is a number that's in the engineering guidelines, and every municipality has engineering guidelines and has a set of runoff coefficients. And those coefficients are tied to the amount of impervious area on a type of property. So for low density residential, high density mixed residential, for all sorts of, there's a long list of different property types. So we've done that calculation to sort of look at the average runoff coming from each property type, and then we base we look at the amount and that sort of gives us a billing unit, and then we divide the total billing units that we have in the city by the amount of money that I need to collect, and that sort of, it becomes proportional to that. So if we have more tiers becomes more accurate because you'll have, it's not a blended rate. It's more accurate for the specific property type. So if we have like all residential as one property type and they're all paying the same, you're averaging the large properties and the small residential properties all together, and they're all paying the same. Whereas if we have more tiers in there, you could have large residential properties, or what we call like low density residential properties. So it's a house with a large property, or the high density residential where it's a tower and everybody's living, there's only a small roof area, but lots of people living in there. So we divide those up differently, and that becomes more equitable and also more affordable for people as well. So I'm not sure, does that answer that question well?
Okay, so is there's some concern about eaves troughs that discharge stormwater onto hard surfaces instead of grass? Is there a bylaw, or should there be a bylaw in place to discourage this?
I'll let Curtis answer that. I think lots of municipalities do have disconnection bylaws.
Yeah, we have incentive. You might have to remind me, we have an incentive program for downspout disconnections.
The bylaw, or the question was a bylaw to disconnect downspouts, or just to direct downspouts onto grassed areas as opposed to hard surfaces?
I think maybe speak to both. Yeah.
So yeah, to Curtis's point, we do have an incentive program to encourage people to disconnect downspouts that are directly connected to the sanitary system.
Yeah.
Because obviously we don't want that extra, cleanish runoff coming into our sanitary system. So we do have a program to support that. We don't currently have any bylaws or anything like that in place to, require even a disconnection from sanitary or from the storm system, or, to get people to discharge onto grassed areas. In some cases, we've had instances where, if it discharges onto a grassed area, it goes right out to a sidewalk, and then the sidewalk ices up quite regularly. So it's really has to be looked at on a site-by-site case basis if it's appropriate. But certainly through Curtis's Rain Garden subsidy program, I mean, that is what we're really trying to do, is get that roof runoff into a location where it can infiltrate. And we'd always encourage people, if they can, to direct their downspouts to a grassed area where it has a chance to filter the water, infiltrate the water. But there's no plans in place right now to require that through bylaw.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to that too. I think a lot of people have a misconception that if their downspout goes onto grass, that it's no longer contributing to the storm sewer network. And grass isn't as pervious as a lot of people think it is. A lot of that water, even though it's outletting onto a piece of grass or a section of grass, the way it's set up, like the swales and things like that, side yard swales to get drainage away from the property, a lot of that water still makes its way into the storm sewer system, even though it's hitting grass before it makes its way out to the curb. So I think that's a bit of a misconception people have, is that, oh, if it's going on to grass, it's infiltrating, when that's not really the case.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. I'm going to put the call out again for any other questions that we might have. And if there's no other questions, then we will wrap up the meeting. But I'll just give you a moment or two if you do have another question that you want to ask about the project, about the stormwater system, about the fee, about the team, or for the team. And while we're waiting to see if there's any other questions come in, maybe Pippi, you can speak a little bit more about how the stormwater management is benefits the environment, or the impact of stormwater on the environment.
Yeah. So stormwater runoff, if it's not managed well, can cause even small storms can cause small regular storms can cause erosion And that sediment can get into the environment and cause problems, can clog up drains and sewers, or can cause siltation in our stormwater management ponds. So, that erosion is a problem in the environment. And then just stormwater runoff that's not managed properly from things like parking lots, that oil and grit can get into the environment and cause, degradation to natural habitats for aquatic species. So, having proper oil grit separators, for example, is very important to make sure that we're managing the stormwater properly before it reaches the natural environment.
Okay. All right. So I'll just remind you again, if there's any other questions after the meeting today, you can definitely reach out to Rethink the Rain at peterborough.ca or ask your questions through the project page. Yes, would anything, we don't have any other questions that have come in. Any other comments or from the project team before we wrap up?
No, I just wanted to thank everyone for coming and for a few good questions today. So that was great, and encourage everyone who's still left on the call to submit your questions, or if you want to talk a little bit more about this, feel free to send us a message, send us an email, or give us a call. That'd be great.
Okay. And of course, just as we're wrapping up, a question pops in. So why don't we do one more and then we'll wrap up. And I think this is just a follow up to the tax question. And I think it's just about, could the significant tax revenue increases have been budgeted to fund adequate stormwater management? So maybe you can speak to that, Ian, if you have any comments on that.
I would try, but there are many competing interests for the budget at the city. So my passion is definitely in water resources and stormwater management. So I would like to have the best stormwater system and the largest budget possible. But obviously, that's not always possible in a municipal world. There are quite a few other competing interests out there. For a municipality, and a lot of challenges related to our ongoing capital budget year in and year out with various forms of infrastructure in various states right across the city that require significant investment. So while I'd like to hope that we could invest heavily in stormwater management, again, there are many competing interests. So
Okay,
yeah.
thank you. And I just got a note here that we do need to make a clarification or a correction. Curtis, Pippi, who's going to take that?
Yeah, I was just gonna go back and edit my one response when we're talking about how we calculate the fees for the different residential properties. It's not actually based on that runoff coefficient, although it's much the same, that we're calculating sort of an average runoff coming from a property, but it's actually based on impervious area that we've measured. So the city did have LiDAR or the aerial photography flown for the whole city. So we were able to use an AI tool that actually developed impervious areas for every property. So we were able to do those calculations that gave us impervious area for each property type. So we didn't base it on the runoff coefficient, which we sometimes do as an approximation. We actually based it on the flown impervious area data that we have for the city. So it's actually more accurate than I said. So I want to make that clarification.
Okay, great. Thank you for clarifying that. Okay, Curtis or Ian, any other comments from you?
No, I think I just kind of echo what Ian said. I appreciate everyone coming out, and yeah, so the survey is open until the 13th. But if anyone has any comments or concerns and things like that, the Connect PTBO will be available kind of throughout the process as well. So you're not limited to that survey to provide feedback.
Okay, thank you very much. And I also will say thank you to everyone and appreciate the time that you've taken this evening. And a reminder that we've given you the information here on the screen for how to reach out to the project team, but you'll also receive a follow-up email, I think tomorrow, that will have this information as well. So lots of ways that you can reach out. So please do that. Thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate the input that you hopefully will be providing through the survey. And and we will see you in a few months for the next round of engagement. All right, have a good evening, everyone.